Hello everyone, it's Joseph and Ray back again for another episode of Ask EVGA. This is episode 11. So very exciting stuff. I did want to address sort of the elephant in the room. My Forza gameplay video has actually gotten quite a bit of attention. Not necessarily so positive. Yes, I do not play racing games very often, and I am not any good at all. But yeah, I've seen a lot of hilarious comments online. I actually ended up making a short edit for Instagram. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
Where I just showed basically all the mistakes that I did, everything I ran into. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of comments. I think that one, the last time I checked, had something like 80 comments, all pretty much saying that I'm either on the spectrum or have some other kind of mental issue. So
if you need someone who can play racing games or sim games,
we do.
Right here.
Okay, well, I'll definitely consider that in the future for some of the gameplay videos, because I hate racing games.
Oh, come on now. They're the best.
Sorry for any racing game fans out there, but I do not typically enjoy those. I really liked Burnout. You ever played the Burnout series?
Yeah, Burnout is fun.
That one was really a lot of fun. Burnout 2 and 3,
2 and
I think,
3
were really good.
Yeah.
Even Revenge, well, actually, I don't know if that was one of the 2 or 3.
A lot of people talk about Paradise, and it's been released several times now, and I don't like Paradise.
I've played Paradise a number of times on different platforms, and I do not enjoy it that much. It lost kind of the je ne sais quoi. How do you say it?
Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi of what really made Burnout what it was.
It makes you hate that song.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, and so basically, jumping right into the questions now. Forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
He's like a weekly visitor now.
Yes, thank you very much for watching and asking questions. Yeah. Forever asks, can you give us a time frame for the next Stinger release?
No. That's usually the case with future products. I'm sure we're not going to give up on the Stinger as a product line, something that we're going to look at going forward. But for the time being, we have the H370 Stinger. That is the Stinger for the 300 series that we have at this point. It actually hasn't been on the market all that long, so I don't have any information about something that would be a successor to it, because as far as I'm concerned, that is the Stinger, at least for the time being.
I was hoping you were going to just leave it at no. That would have been funny.
All right, well, then we'll move on to the next question. This was from Kelpie Gus. I think that's how you say that. Okay. So I should put some context in this. Some of these questions are not actually from the last Ask EVGA segment. There honestly weren't that many questions on there, or at least not that many that I felt needed to be addressed. So I kind of grabbed questions from a bunch of different videos. So this one, I believe, was for the 390 overview that we just did for the FTW. So he's actually asking this question in regards to the 390. So it supports BIOS microcode updates for the new CPUs, question mark. Z390 should support 9th gen out of the box. So does that mean that Z390 will also support other upcoming CPUs?
Well, I guess that's technically up to Intel if they decide to release another processor.
Right.
But essentially, in the past, you've had motherboards that came out. I think the Z170 had a CPU. Well, I'm not sure which one. But
1 and 2, you could use one Z170 and Z270. You can essentially use the same processors on either.
Right. So we ended up releasing a firmware update later on for some of the earlier Z170 motherboards that allowed you to use the newer CPUs. Some people, when I was in customer service, I had people call in and they're like, "Oh, I sold my old CPU to buy this new one, and now I can't use it because I'm getting this, postcode error." Right. And obviously we knew what the postcode was related to. So in a lot of our motherboards, we do have replaceable BIOS chips. In those cases, we can just send you a chip. But then again, at that point, you'd have to wait a little bit for that to arrive. And it's a bit of a hassle. It's a bit of a nuisance. So now with the new SPI flashing, you can just update the firmware without the CPU installed. Right. And it does happen.
Right.
We don't know if it's going to happen, for instance, with this current generation, because Intel hasn't announced any new CPUs yet, and the platform had just came out. So
right, yeah.
But there is potential for that in the future.
Yeah. So anything Z390, any processors right now will be supported. We've already updated 370s to support what we say future CPUs. That's what we put in our update notes, so we don't specify what CPUs, but they have support. We'll just put it at that. Like Joseph said, we do have that CPU free flashing method now, and we actually want to do a video on that because it's pretty cool.
Yes.
So we plan on showing that to you guys soon here. So able to flash it without the CPU actually helps you and helps customer service with an issue that does show up whenever a new chipset comes out, and there's potentially some issues with compatibility.
Yes, excellent new feature. Okay, this one is from Antoni Papadimitriou. I think I got that right.
Sounds good to me.
What about if you update BIOS on SLI? Is it going to update both cards' BIOSes?
Okay, this is from the GPU firmware update video that I was just in, and basically we did a single card in that with an update that we got from the forums. We actually had to ask our product manager about this, Jacob, because we weren't 100% sure, but the way it should work is actually if you did have an SLI, it should identify both cards and it should flash them one at a time. So if that's the case where you have a matching SLI of the same cards and they both need the same BIOS update, then that's fine. You can leave both cards in and it should work just fine. If you had an SLI where the models were different for any reason, say one's SC2 and the other one is ICX but not an SC2, then it's probably best to do them one at a time because you don't want to try to flash that same BIOS to both cards. The flasher may catch that and not do it, but as that's not something I personally tested, I would say probably just want to do them one at a time. But if you have a matching SLI, and most people do when they have SLI, that should work just fine. Yeah.
I seem to recall in the past that it gives you a prompt beforehand that it recognized the two cards. I don't know if that's still the case, though.
Right.
But I seem to recall that in the past. But
we may test in the future.
Yes, that is something we should test.
All right, this one is from Joe Blow, and he asks, I'm at the point where I try not to update anything if it's working properly already. This is in regards to the GPU flashing as well. Is there any performance gain of doing this? Oh, higher power output. Oh, see, that's actually useful. Yeah, the BIOS that we showed in that video is higher power target, and it was useful. I can't use the latest GPU drivers from NVIDIA because they won't work with the Oculus Rift. Have you tested this firmware with the Rift yet?
As far as the performance gain, like you seem to have realized while you were writing out the comment, sometimes there will be a performance boost or something that can at least help you attain a performance boost. So something like a higher power target. Right. A lot of times too, if it's a new graphics card, if it's a new series, for instance, and it comes out and people start discovering a particular issue, sometimes a firmware update can fix that. Sure. So I think it was the 900 series when there was a DisplayPort issue. So we had BIOS updates for all the 900 series essentially for some motherboards that just or some kind of systems that maybe weren't compatible with if you were using DisplayPort as your main display, you would just get no screen at all. And so we came out with a firmware fix that fixed that. So yeah, performance sometimes, just issues at other points in time. Even if there's like an LED issue or things like that sometimes. As far as testing with an Oculus Rift, you know what? We haven't done that. No. I believe that we have one.
Issue myself, actually.
Yeah, I think Jacob has an Oculus somewhere around here. We have the Vive. We obviously can test with that. But I actually haven't even been made aware of the issue that the latest NVIDIA drivers don't work with that. That's definitely something that they would fix pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so.
I'm 99% sure if that's the case, then that's going to be a driver and not a firmware issue. And with our firmware updates, they usually will just have like one update. So for this update, it was a really small change, and that was changing power target maximum from 112 to 130. No other changes in that BIOS update. That's all it was for. So it's rare that you'll have like a bunch of things in a firmware update, because quite frankly firmware doesn't need to be updated very often. So I agree to your point. If it's working, don't mess with it. Firmware is something you usually don't need to flash. So motherboards, it's a little bit more common to do it, but graphics cards, it's pretty uncommon.
Right.
So that's why we did that video, because apparently a lot of people are not aware that we will put BIOS updates on the forums for certain things. So if you have an XE Ultra like we showed in that video, and maybe you wanted to get a little bit higher overclock, and as we're seeing, RTX cards really do like having a higher power target, that could give you a tangible increase in your overclock ability.
One other thing too, the 1080 Ti's, they dealt with memory very well, memory speed. So we did release a 12 gigahertz update to the 11 gigahertz out of the box for some of the ICX technology cards.
For some of the elites, yeah.
So that was a pretty cool update too.
Yeah, I think we did 2 separate updates. We had one for 1080 Ti's because Micron released a 12 gigabit chip, and we started building that into cards. And they also had an 11 gigabit chip that went into 1080s, because 1080s are normally 10 gigabit. So anyone who owns, say, an FTW2 1080, you actually have 11 gigabit VRAM modules on your card, but from the factory they often will only have the 10 gigahertz BIOS if you bought it before a certain date, and that's why we have the update for that on the forum. So feel free to get a free performance upgrade by running those chips at their rated speed.
Yeah, and at that time too, I was in CS, and we were sort of prepared to, you know, if anyone was going to say the BIOS update was causing stability issues, and I never saw a single person contact us back about that, because the chips were
they were
designed
meant for that speed. The only thing that we ever saw was people maybe had trouble actually getting it to flash, but
yeah,
usually just other things were open.
Yeah, hopefully with our flash video, that helps.
Makes it a little bit clearer.
Okay, and this one's from Adam.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very bad with, I believe that's a Russian last name.
I believe so.
I have a tough time. Does NVBridge or, NVBridge on these RTX GeForce cards could be using CUDA to data transfers, or only allows for SLI over this bridge?
The NVLink, while it carries the same name of NVLink on other professional NVIDIA cards like Quadros and Teslas, it is different. So it's a larger data bus on those professional cards, whereas it's a slower one on the RTX GeForce cards. The reason for that being is that it is more focused for SLI support. So what he may be referring to is what NVIDIA talked about on stage, where the high-end cards can actually, the Tesla cards and the Quadros can share frame buffer. So if, for example, you have an 11 gigahertz or 11 gigabyte RTX card that's one of the professional cards, and you NVLink it to another card, you can then effectively have a 22 gigabyte card, because they can share that frame buffer, because the transfer speeds between the two cards are really, really high. On the consumer level, it doesn't have that high of a bandwidth, so they don't share the frame buffer. But I believe if you look at the professional RTX bridges, for that purpose, they're like $500–600. So they really focus on a much higher end, mostly for like production work, 3D rendering, that kind of stuff, where you may need, or scientific modeling, where you may need a huge amount of frame buffer to be able to do that. So that's not functionality that the GeForce RTX has at this point. Maybe there's something that NVIDIA has up their sleeves to make that possible. I'm just not aware of that functionality at this point.
Yeah, and NVIDIA, if you're watching, send Ray and I a couple Quadros, and
we'd love to try them.
ProBridge for testing.
Certainly things like I've done Blender for years and years. I don't think Blender supports RTX just yet, but yeah, running out of frame buffer is a real thing when you're doing 3D modeling. So that would be cool. All right, this is our final question for today. This is from Sander. He asks, your website says, and this is in regards to the specs on the RTX 2080 and 2080 Ti. Yes. We actually got this question several times, so it's good that we can address this. I think this was on the RTX unboxing video. He says, your website says that its maximum frame rates is 144 frames. Did I misunderstand? If not, why?
The max frame rate, so it's actually kind of variable with this particular generation. The 20 series, at least the 2080 and 2080 Ti, you can do up to 240 hertz maximum refresh rate, up to 1080p. And then any of the resolutions that it supports, up to 8K, beyond 1080p, only support 144 hertz this time around. That's kind of locked down by NVIDIA. As far as I'm aware, that it's a limitation that they set. And it makes sense.
Right. It's no worse. It didn't go down versus 10 series, so you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
If you already have a 240 hertz 1080p monitor or a 1440p that goes to 165, there's no reason why it wouldn't be just as easily supported with the 20 series than it would on the 10 series, other than on the 20 series you may actually get higher frame rates and closer to that speed.
Yeah. And I am working on trying to add that to the actual specs page, something to clarify the difference. I've also notified our customer service department, the entire team, so that they're aware of this. So if you do call in and ask, or if someone does call in and ask, we can explain that properly to them. But yeah, that is, it's not a misunderstanding. It just works a little bit differently with these cards than normally.
Right, yeah. I think because we originally put the NVIDIA spec on our website, and the NVIDIA spec, from my understanding, it really only means when you're running at the highest supported resolution. So at the highest supported resolution, 144 would be the highest supported refresh rate. So there you go.
Yep.
All right. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Ask EVGA. As ever, please put your questions in the comment section below, and we will get to that in a future episode. You have a good one. Bye.
Bye. You got through that one, okay?
Yeah, I did.